I'm Michelle Cabusi. I teach public health law and public health policy here at Loyola, and I am thrilled to be able to present to you local advocates for gun violence prevention. I am going to give very brief introductions for each one of our panelists. Most of them have a story to tell as to why they are involved. Some of these stories are heartbreaking, and so I want it to be for them to tell their own stories. Each panelist will speak for roughly 5 to 7 minutes, and then we will have time for questions at the end. All right. First, we have Dr. Hala Akbarnia. She is an emergency room physician, emergency medicine physician, and works for Doctors for America to help prevent gun violence and is affiliated with Moms Demand Action. Next, we have Tom Vandenberg, who has a long history in gun violence prevention work. Most recently, he is the co-founder of GPAC. Next, we have Brian Dye. Brian has been engaged with youth mentorship since 1992, and he founded Legacy Disciple in 2018. Legacy Disciple develops leaders that turn development programs and initiatives for the greater good of our society. Next, we have Jarvis Buchanan. Jarvis is the founder of Hood Heroes, which is a program within Legacy Disciples. And then Alicia Schemmel. Alicia is another longtime gun violence prevention activist. She is with the Everytown for Gun Safety Survivors Network. She's a Survivors Network fellow. She's also affiliated with Moms Demand Action. And finally, last but certainly not least, Kitty Brantner, who in the wake of the Highland Park July 4th mass shooting founded March 4th with a singular goal of having the assault weapons ban put in place at the federal level. So if we could start with Dr. Akbarnia, you have the mic.
Is it on? Is it on? Oh, there you go. Not very good with the technology part, but just like Michelle said, thank you so much, by the way, for having me and I'm sure everybody on this panel here. This is such a great opportunity to get advocates together. It's always empowering. And I think every so often we just need that boost to kind of push us forward. Some people always say, you know, why do you just keep doing it? It seems like just we're never getting anywhere, but we really are. And every single time we kind of get together like this, we make new friends and we kind of get new connections and find new ways to kind of fight this fight that seems to never end. Again, my name is Hala Akbarnia. I'm an ER emergency medicine physician. I work primarily out of, I'm actually completely in between jobs. I start my new job at Advocate Lutheran tomorrow. But still an Advocate hospital. I've been out of Advocate Condell in Lake County, which is the only level 1 trauma center in Lake County. So hold on one second, sorry about that. And there I do a lot of work with our community violence intervention programs there, connecting our hospital's trauma recovery center to the community intervention programs there. So, but a fun fact, I actually started my my medical career out of medical school here out in Loyola. I did my first year as an intern here in the surgical department when I was thinking I was doing orthopedics, and did my preliminary year in surgery here. And I distinctly remember the first gunshot victim I had was here at Loyola. And because I did my medical school in Vermont and we didn't have a lot there, the gun violence victims in Vermont that would come in were primarily because of suicide, and we didn't see them. So that's one thing that Chris was mentioning, is that we just don't see those patients very often. But at Loyola, we saw a lot of them, unfortunately. And so for me, that was my first exposure with treating gun violence victims. And I distinctly remember being completely taken by a victim who had come in, a young 13, 14-year-old who was shot. And my role was to sit on the stretcher with his chest open, pumping his heart as we headed to the operating room. he didn't make it, but that entire process and that entire experience for me started here and just drove into me that this is something that should never have happened. It also shouldn't have happened when I was in 7th grade. And one of my best friend's brother came to school with a loaded gun, of which I must have been around because I've been at her house before. And he brought the gun to school, angry at something that had happened between one of his friends, and shot several people in the classroom next to mine. That was my first experience as a 7th grader. No internet back then, so how our parents heard about it was on the news that Parkway South Junior had a shooting. And you can imagine the chaos that caused, not being able to contact us at the time. And then when I was an EMT, I was working in the streets of St. Louis and doing CPR on a patient, and gang members came and shot at our ambulance, and that bullet missed my head by about 3 inches. I was 19 at the time, so somehow I don't know why I just kind of put that in the back of my mind and kind of compartmentalized it. But the problem with that was that when I was in college and somebody would like throw something in a trash can, the next thing I was down on the ground and thinking that, you know, the police were telling me that, or something was being shot near me, I think. And walking out of, so you'd think that was enough, but the third time was when I walked out of the emergency room at one of the Chicago hospitals I work at, Community First. And I happened to be walking out at 1 a.m, which is the best time when you leave the hospital. But a car drove by at that exact moment and started shooting at an individual on my side of the street. So not me, but I was right there. And thank God he missed me, but bullet after bullet after bullet. And every single time, every bullet you hear, and I know people have experienced this, you think this is the one that's going to end my life. And that fear and that driving force of like, why is it okay that in this country, this is allowed, that I am allowed to run like I've never run before. Although it did show me that after my post ACL knee that I thought I would never be able to run. I actually can run pretty fast, freaking fast. But so there is that. Sorry about that. My phone keeps shutting off. But so I decided that at that time I started becoming more kind of behind the scenes. And in 2016, I joined Moms Demand, which was the biggest and still is the biggest grassroots organization out there. And through them, I just went to chapters and listened and became involved in a way that I could medically by giving lectures and talking about what it's like to treat gun violence victims. I never spoke about my own experience. I felt that I didn't need to, and I didn't really want to. I think at the time, I didn't even really consider being a survivor because I wasn't shot. So to me, that didn't seem like that even put me in that category, but I'm learning a lot different right now. I joined them, and then I also became, but I realized in the last couple of years that being much more at a grassroots level in front of people talking about the politics behind this, and more so just laws that need to be passed, and being a medical voice is much more powerful place for me to be. For me, it may not be for everybody. So I'm much more active in moms. I'm a member of a group called Impact, which is a Illinois medical professional group of physicians that kind of formed during COVID. Doctors for America has been a great place for me to be because I can be there as the vice chair of the Community and Health Prevention, which oversees the gun violence arm. And we partner with everyone. We will partner with any group that comes to us because our voice is much more grassroots, and we will go to any place to talk for you. I know that you mentioned Colleen Creighton at Brady. We're partnering with them to work on their suicide campaign, and we've worked together with the Physicians of March 4th, and we're working together with many local physicians and national physicians to try to form more of a coalition where our voices can definitely tell the public what we see, because I don't think it's a voice that's been out there very long, you know. So in all of this, I've also decided to go back and get my master's in public health, which over 50, and I'm dating myself as well, is never fun. But from that, I can also bring in the research into it as well. So I know I don't have a lot more time, so I'm going to just kind of finish off by saying, for everybody who's in here, especially for medical students, public health students, physicians, and anyone in the healthcare, really anybody, I think the concept of working together is the most important thing. Join coalitions that are out there, like I'm part of Illinois Alliance to Prevent Gun Violence, GPAC, multiple different groups that are out there that put together many groups to kind of inform. You can do that. Join Doctors for America. We will get you into any forum that you want, and also just learn more about what's out there medically. Safe Scrubs is a great way to do it. I think Loyola must have it. I think Loyola has a chapter, but if not, it's for medical students to kind of join, bring a chapter in Scrubs addressing firearm epidemic, and just overall get out there and join groups of people who are doing this. May 16th is Advocacy Day for Moms Demand. Anybody can join us. We're going to Springfield, field trip. So reach out to anyone in a red shirt. I'm sure they'll give you information about that as well. With that, I know I've probably gone over a minute or two, so I'm going to pass the mic on. But it's just exciting to be here with everybody too.
Thank you very much. When Michelle said I have a long history, that's a nice way of saying this guy is really old and he's been around a long time. So thank you. What I do bring is some perspective to this movement, if you will. Seeing Chris here today is exciting because I served on the board of Brady campaign for 10 years, from 2000 to 2010. Actually got very disappointed because I think we didn't make a lot of progress then, but I'll leave that for later. Because there's certain gloom and doom going on, not here, because you guys are here, but outside, it's like another shooting. Oh my God, I'm so depressed. What we can't do anything about this. What, you know, they're not going to make any change. And then the next day there's another one. But a little perspective here is that the NRA is getting weaker. Okay. They have a lot of internal conflict. They're not raising the kind of money they used to raise, and they're relying pretty much solely on bullying. They bully representatives and senators, and you all know that very well if you're familiar with it. They are being bullied, and that's the last tactic they got. It's a strong one because you know, they carry guns, and we worry a little bit about that. But we shouldn't be so fearful of that bullying. So that's a good news. That's good news. The other good news is I've seen the development of our national groups coming together with this, with one agenda, with an understanding of we have to work together. We all sort of have our own expertise and we're finding our lanes, so to speak, but we're not pushing everybody else out. A friend of mine, Donna Dees Thomas, who started the Million Mom March, back many years ago, said, well, I got to write a book on how the gun violence prevention movement shoots itself in the foot every day. So we're making progress here. We're doing much better. We're working together. We've got our niches. Brady's come a long way developing it. Moms Demand Action, folks on the ground, the grassroots, we've never had that kind of organization before. And that's really, really positive. So I think that's overwhelming. The other thing is that we don't have to convince the majority of this country about guns and the scariness of it. The majority is with us. Now we have to figure out, of course, how to bring that majority around the voting entity. The other thing I think has been very positive, and the mayor brought this up, is the community violence intervention programs that we're starting to understand, and we're being funded now so that communities, poorer communities, focus on youth, development of youth, and how we can do gun violence interruption, and how those youth who are in those communities need to support around jobs and education and everything else. So that, I think, has been a very positive element too. The other thing is I like to talk about, and this is where sort of I come in, and that is the effectiveness of a strategic legislative process. I'm involved in this since I lost my son in 1992 to gun violence. Obviously devastation, and we know all about how what that does to you, but The research then that I did helped me figure out, it isn't about the youth who are responsible. It's about the guns that they had available to them for such a lethal purpose. It's way too easy. Why would a youth be able to get a gun that could do that kind of devastation that it did to my 15-year-old son in minutes? How did that happen? Well, my research and study became very clear that the industry is responsible for marketing, developing the whole illegal gun process. And that's why it was so easy and is so easy for youth to get guns and do the kind of destruction and the kind of chaos that they're available to. Chris brought up Switzerland. They have mental health problems in Switzerland. They have poverty in Switzerland. London, England, has a lot of juvenile offenders. But the homicide rate doesn't even compare. Why? It's the accessibility. So our purpose, once I was done with the work that I had done with Brady and many other organizations around the nonprofit organizations with the purpose of educating the country, educating individuals, doing the research, but it always was a nonprofit organization that was funding our efforts. It's not, and a lot of foundations were very helpful in that. But the problem is we have to change not politicians' minds, but their ability to vote, okay, for what we want. And how do you accomplish that? During this process of figuring this out, many people said to me, well, it's really pretty simple. Because elected officials think of one of two things: money and votes. If you want to change their mind, you have to support them or dis-support them. In other words, fund against them or help them get elected by getting votes. So that's when I adapted this political strategy. It wasn't me. Several of us put together this idea that you really have to have a gun violence prevention action committee as well as a PAC. So we founded GPAC and the Gun Violence Prevention Action Committee. And I'll explain a little bit about, for those who understand, a PAC can support a candidate. They can give money to a candidate. They can add for a candidate. They can collaborate with a candidate. And so candidates are very happy if you're supporting their efforts. And you can do the other opposite, which is you can put ads and everything against somebody who you don't support. So people pay attention to that. The other thing that we did was form the Gun Violence Prevention Action Committee, which is a C4. And the C4 is about social welfare and the welfare of this country and the welfare of people. What does that allow us to do? It allows us to do a lot of things like hire lobbyists, pay for communication entities, all the kind of digital marketing that's going on today. So that's what you use a C4 for. And then we also have a GPAC IE, which is a super PAC that Chris talked about. And that's important because sometimes people with serious money are able to give you the kind of effort and energy that you want. Super PAC doesn't, you don't have to report it and you can put as much money as you want. How I started this was basically with the idea of, this is our plan. We need to work towards getting illegal guns off the street. What's the process for us doing that? And we understand that legitimate ownership is okay, but we passed the certification of dealers so that we can go after dealers. We collaborate with Brady and identifying who they are, and now sheriffs and state police can do that, and they've done it. So we have that. We have the bio bill, which is increasing the accountability for purchases. Police Department, Chicago Police Department said if you can do this universal background check, personal sales, and keep the digital records of that, we'll improve our clearance rate by 50%. So that we've passed. That is going to be effective July 1st. Ghost guns, illegal in the state of Illinois. Got that passed in a couple of months. Number 3. The assault weapon ban was obviously a huge collaboration of a lot of people to make that happen. Moms Demand Action, every town, Brady, Giffords really came together and very significant in the large capacity magazine elimination, the assault weapon ban, several other provisions, very important, including lengthening the FRO bill by the time for a FRO by 6 months. So that also was beneficial. So there's a lot you can do, and I won't go on, but thing you can do is understand who is your representative, who's your state senator, and become politically active in terms of what do they vote for and how do you support that, and you support their efforts. So I think my time is up. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
As I sit up here, I'm like, why am I here? Sitting amongst some giants who are much more educated than I am, but I'm a lifetimer, Chicago West Side. Grew up half of my life in the Humboldt Park neighborhood. Second half of my life has been in the West Garfield Park neighborhood. If you know Humboldt Park in the 80s and 90s, it's one of the most violent communities. If you know West Garfield Park today, it has the highest per capita murder rate in the city of Chicago. So gun violence is something that's near and dear to me. I've been to, in my 46 years of life, I've been to probably close to 50 funerals of friends and mentees who have died to gun violence. These aren't just numbers to me. These are faces. These are names. I remember, so my life is I grew up in a home on food stamps. I had an alcoholic father who at least was present, but many times I wish he wasn't present. He was abusive. My mom, to this day, has suffered from schizophrenia, bipolar. And so me and my 4 brothers, we kind of had to figure out life pretty quick. And so when I think of individuals such as me, the trauma affects our decisions, the trauma affects how we pursue life. It's easy to become hopeless. It's easy just to follow the path. And so I so appreciate those who are fighting to change our national gun laws. If it was up to me, I would say, let's burn all the guns. But I know in America, that's probably not going to happen. But we need to keep fighting for these changes at a macro level, but also at a micro level. What change can we do? And that's what I've kind of devoted my life to. And so I had a mentor at 14 years old who kind of walked with me and two of my best friends. And he challenged us that the change that was happening in our life needed to happen in other people's lives. So he gave us tools and he gave us resources. And so he gave me the keys to a gym in Humboldt Park when I was like 16 years old. And he says, you have the keys to this gym, invite friends, use it. And so I remember, just 10, 11 o'clock at night, open up this gym, and it was a raggedy gym. It was carpet on the floor, low ceiling, poles in the middle, so forth. But it was a space. And so I would invite friends, let's come play ball instead of hanging outside. And one of my friends, Fatty, we were playing ball together late at night, and we both go home, and 2 hours later, I'm called by his mom. Says, come to Mount Sinai Hospital. Fatty been shot. And I'm pulled back into the room in the back, and he's already dead. Cody, another kid that I would open up the gym for, and when I would take him home, he would flash gang signs to other cars. And I'm like, Cody, you can't do that. Like, you put in yourself in danger, you put me in danger as well. But just being present, walking with people, mentoring people, and having some success stories and seeing some not turn out the way that I hoped. It didn't take long to realize that that I'm at the bottom of the river trying to pull out dead bodies, trying to keep people from dying. And I needed to get further upstream. And so how do we start younger? How do we equip more people to do the work? Because the greatest solution to any problem is found by those who deal with that problem the most. And so the people who are going to be the greatest advocates against gun violence, in my opinion, are the people who live with it every day. 20 years ago, when I moved into West Garfield, I had a bullet go through our bedroom, missed my wife in bed by 2 inches. 2 years ago, I'm walking with a team to my car, and we were shot at up close. Luckily, both of us were missed, but it's people who live with the reality day to day that know the solutions that need to be taken. And so I've devoted my life to, we started an organization officially in 2018 called Legacy Disciple. And our whole mission, our whole goal is to equip leaders from the West and South Side of Chicago to be the leaders in their community. So we started a program called Thriving Minds. So we have staff who are going into elementary schools, working with students, 4th grade, creating a wellness room where students over lunch and recess could come and do mindful practices and do creative expressions. We have brotherhood and sisterhood mentorship programs that happen in local churches around the city of Chicago that students come to for social, emotional, and spiritual mentorship. Jarvis will share more about a program called Hood Heroes, which employs teens to work to earn some money to grow as leaders. We do home ownership through a program called J29 Homes, knowing that homeowners seek the welfare of their community in a way that renters don't. And so how do we help to empower people to be homeowners of their community? And so that's my approach. Again, how do we raise up a multitude of leaders? How do we encourage them, equip them, and empower them to be the change agents that they know are needed in their own communities?
I'm Jarvis Buchanan. I think about getting ready to walk into this room, kind of pause at the door for a little bit. I heard someone mention about checking for exits. All right, and I was a little hesitant to even take my seat. I'm just like, man, I don't see too many doors. I don't like that. All right, from Chicago, born and raised. Half of life on the south side of Chicago, half of life on the west side. I'm pretty young, but I guess that's how I kind of make sense of it. We were asked when we started, right, to close our eyes and to think about society, so to speak, right, where was it that guns didn't exist, right? Gun violence didn't exist. And that wasn't hard for me to do. Because I think about it every day. That's my motivation. for what I do. It's when I close my eyes, when I go, started Hood Heroes in 2020. I've been a counselor in schools a number of years. But when I see my students, building relationships with them, doing facilitating group circles and check-ins and leaders in training, right? Hood Heroes leaders in training, equipping our 16 and older students, not just to say, hey, you have to be a leader, you should be leaders, but I don't know what that means unless I see it. And for Black and brown boys and girls, where do we really see leaders and know? And we can get behind closed doors and ask real questions, right? How do you keep the lights on in this place? Right? Who's paying the bills? How do your operations go? Right? Who's on your board? All of those questions, right? And so that's a kind of an avenue of Hood Heroes that I've been graced to lead, right? Again, thinking about that question, a society where gun violence didn't exist. That was hard for me. For me, a society where gun violence didn't exist, my mother would still be here. Right. And every so often, my wife and myself, we have a conversation with my 3-year-old daughter. All right. And I just can't help but think, like, man, what would that be like for my daughter to have a relationship with my mom, who was killed, who was shot on the west side of the city, where currently, I serve and started Hood Heroes, employing youth. If there's any area of focus, Chris, you mentioned a number of areas of solutions, so to speak, legislation, gun industry accountability, all that stuff. That's big to me. That make my head hurt. It involves other people. But when I started Hood Heroes in 2020, I started with 10 students who were supposed to be sitting in my group sessions during the shutdown, who are outside, right? And I know what they're facing in West Garfield Park. For me, the need I saw for them was, hey, I want to make some money, but they're seeing guys on the corner. Friends are being shot and killed, right? The enticement of the power that comes with holding a firearm, that enticement, right? That's what we face. And so if there's any area I'm gonna be passionate about, I'll be passionate about kids. So when I'm looking for exits, I'm thinking about Kitty here at the end of the table who got 3 kids. And I'm like, man, on the way out the door, I'm grabbing Kitty. She got to get home to her 3 kids. All right. His brother lost his son, and I'm thinking about how to get him out this door when I leave. All right. I think the more that we care about kids and we prioritize kids, that should be our aim. Care about kids. Whether you have them or used to have them or whatever, care about kids. And when we put every other agenda aside, I don't care what it is, all this stuff matters. It's all important. When we put kids at the front, at the center, and I'm from the hood. It's certain conflicts that we don't allow to happen, that just don't go down because it's kids right here. Now you got to find another space for that. You got to find another time for that because it's kids right here. So the conversation about disrespect, it's got to wait. This little thing that we're gonna hash out, whatever, it's got to wait. It's kids right here. We got to prioritize kids. And I'm passionate about leading that, continue to lead that with Hood Heroes. And yeah, that's my mission, that's my vision. I'm grateful to God to be here.
That was awesome. My name is Alicia Schemmel. As Michelle had mentioned, I'm a Everytown Senior Survivor Fellow. Thank you so much for having all of us today. I just want to add a quick note that I'm going to be talking about gun violence and how gun violence has directly affected me. So that's a trigger for anyone. I just want to put that out there now. If you haven't heard of Everytown, it's the umbrella organization over Moms Demand Action, Students Demand Action, and the Everytown Survivor Network. Moms Demand Action was founded after the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary in 2012, where 26 students, teachers, and their principal lost their lives. Moms Demand Action is a grassroots movement of Americans fighting for public safety measures that can protect people from gun violence. We pass stronger gun laws and work to close loopholes that jeopardize the safety of our families. We also work in our own communities and with business leaders to encourage a culture of responsible gun ownership. We're a very inclusive group and we have chapters in every state. The closest group to us here is the Oak Park, Austin area group, and the easiest way to get involved is to text the word join to 64433. The Everytown Survivor Network was formed as a means to connect those of us who have been directly impacted by gun violence. We participate in a variety of activities, including lobbying for gun safety legislation, collaborating with community partners, and offering resources and support to survivors of gun violence. The goal of the Survivor Network is to empower survivors to take action and create meaningful change in their communities and in the country as a whole. The term survivor was coined as a means to recognize that we have survived the worst possible thing happening to us, losing a child, a parent, a family member, surviving being shot, or the trauma of witnessing a shooting. If you are a survivor of gun violence, I would be happy to connect you with the Everytown Survivor Network. I lost my dad to gun violence. My dad's name was Don Schemmel. He was a ship captain in Chicago. I grew up driving boats and sailing on Lake Michigan, and I'm also a ship captain by trade. One day, I was driving a boat along the Chicago River, and my dad was on his way to our docks to pick me up. While he was waiting for a train across the Amtrak train bridge near the corner of Lumber and Canal Streets, he was stopped there waiting for the train, and someone parked their car behind his truck, walked up to his truck and shot him 5 times, 3 times in the head and twice in the arm. I made it to the hospital just in time for him to die next to me on the table with me covered in his blood. It's been 23.5 years since my dad was shot and killed, and his murder is still unsolved. And you know, I've been talking about this for 23.5 years, and every single time I think about the crime scene, I always get choked up. And it's the trauma of what you see there, it will never leave you. And the thing is that my story is not unique. Over 120 Americans are shot and killed in this country every year, and 200 are shot and wounded every day. Gun violence costs our nation $557 billion a year. The gun homicide rate in the US is 26 times higher than other developed nations. And what's also not unique about my story is that my dad's murder is unsolved. The murder clearance rate in the US is around 48%. So that means that less than half of gun homicides in our country are cleared. In certain cities, the murder clearance rate is much lower. Chicago, for example, has a historically lower gun homicide clearance rate than the national average, with less than 31% of gun homicides being cleared. And that number of 31% comes from Chicago themselves. So take that number for what you want. When the FBI calculates murder clearance rate, they divide the total number of murders by the murders solved, either by arrest or by exception. Exception means they've identified the murderer, but for whatever reason, they cannot arrest that person. Examples of exceptions are a murder-suicide situation, the suspected killer has died, or the killer is already in prison in another state. So just because a murder is cleared does not necessarily mean that it has been solved. Therefore, the number of murders, the number of people held accountable for gun homicides is far less than what the numbers truly reflect. According to the Chicago Tribune in 2021, Chicago had 1,300 homicide detectives. That same year, they had 797 homicides. That's an average of about 2 detectives per murder case. The nationwide average is 5 5 murder cases per detective. And I want to note that same year, CPD had a budget of $1.9 billion. So back in the 1960s, we solved about 90% of gun homicides. That's a steep decline to where we are today at around 48%. So why are we not solving these? Here's a few reasons. Number one is the higher standards. In the digital age we live in today, with DNA evidence, juries expect more physical evidence in a case to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the killer is guilty. And while that has no bearing on whether the DA chooses to accept the charges, it has raised the bar for crime scene detectives. Cops are much less likely to make an arrest if they don't have evidence to support their case. Another one is community relations. Black murders are statistically less likely to be solved than white murders. As Black victims of gun murders has increased, the poor relations between Black Americans and police officers has made it harder for police to get evidence about who might have committed the crime. Some communities don't trust the police because of evidence of racism. And instead of working together, they take things into their own hands, which creates a cycle of violence that's very difficult to interrupt. And the biggest reason as to why we're not solving most of these gun homicides is the guns. In the 1960s, about 50% of murders were committed with a gun. Today, it's almost 80%. As the number of murders by firearm went up, the murder clearance rate went down at an almost identical rate. We are a country awash in guns, over 400 million to be exact. Not only are we selling more guns and during more homicides, we aren't even holding people accountable for these gun deaths. What we need is to start solving these homicides and changing our country's gun culture. Changing the gun culture starts with education, like being here in this room today. And it's learning that the data shows that having a gun in the home makes us much less safe, not more safe. Studies have shown and continue to show that owning a gun increases the risk of firearm accidents, domestic violence, unintentional shootings, suicides, and homicides. So Michelle had asked us for a few key takeaways for you. So tangible action items that you can do to help redirect our country's gun culture. The biggest thing I would say is to become more politically active. Know who your legislators are at all levels, local, state, and federal. No meeting is too small and no leader insignificant. Also, attend community meetings where decisions are being made and make your voice heard. You can do a simple online search for your city and just show up. Talk about why gun violence prevention is important to you. The more that we bring this issue to the forefront of people's minds, the more that we can enact change. Support community and hospital-based violence interruption programs. These are the people like Hala who are on the forefront of this epidemic, and we need to support them. Don't support organizations, companies, or stores who don't recognize gun safety, and especially those who negligently flaunt gun extremism. Support the ones that do. And as Chris had mentioned before, I think someone had mentioned, talk to family members who are on the difficult side. We all know them. Engage in an open dialogue with those families that know in their heart that we have a gun violence epidemic in this country, but maybe they have strong ties to shooting ranges or hunting. Owning a gun and being a supporter of gun sense are not mutually exclusive. We can do both. Also, lift up the voices of students and youth who are making a difference in this movement. If it weren't for them, we would not have made the progress that we have, and the NRA would not be as weak as they are. It was the brave students at Parkland who stood up to the gun industry and initiated the slow crumbling of the gun manufacturers and extremists. To date, Moms Demand Action has more active volunteers than NRA members. And that doesn't even include numbers from Brady or Giffords, because I don't have access to those numbers. So the point is, we are winning, and we are going to keep on going. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, can you hear me? Or should I go with that one? Okay. I'm the last one. This has been an amazing long morning. If you're able, stand up with me. Let's just stretch for a second. This is heavy, heavy, heavy topics, right? And heavy work. So you were asked to close your eyes with Chris, and you're asked to just get some stretches out with me really quick. So while you're stretching, I'm going to do a quick intro, and we can, feel free to sit as you want. My name's Kitty Brantner. I'm just a mom, guys. Like, everyone here is a lot more eloquent and educated than I. I'm not a victim or survivor of a mass shooting or gun violence yet. Statistically, who knows, unfortunately, given the state of our country. I was just a regular working mom of 3 as of last summer, and Uvalde wrecked me. Sandy Hook did too, but I didn't have kids. And I think there's a sphere, right, where you relate to something. Uvalde, I'm like, why didn't the world just stop? People went to school and didn't come home. It can be that simple. My husband and I went overseas just after, and it's all I could talk about. So I was talking with literally anyone that would listen if they understood what I was saying, because I was obviously speaking in English, just saying, like, this is what happened. I'm like crying. And I heard the same message from parents and citizens of Germany, England, France, New Zealand, Australia. They all said the same thing. It was as if they had met before and like came out with talking points. They were all like, oh, I'm so sorry. That's just never going to be our reality. Like, we empathize with you, but it's so hard for us to get guns, let alone assault weapons. And I just kept being like, then why is it our reality? Like, this is America. What are we doing? And then about a month later, it hit home for me, so to speak, right? Everyone is impacted in different ways. I took my 3 kids to a 4th of July parade, right? I bought their red, white, and blue outfits. I was so excited. After COVID, they've never been to a parade. And suddenly I'm getting texts from friends saying, we're running for our lives. There's an active shooter. Next thing I know, we're sheltering in place from a man with an AR-15 who was at large. And again, I just kept asking, why are we living like this? Like, why are we just okay with it? And shame on me for not getting involved sooner, right? Like, I'm here from the sheep seats. My kids have not run from a mass shooter or any shooter for that matter. People like Alicia who work and advocate for Moms Demand in every town. Like, I've donated in the past. I kind of just kept an arm's length because I'm like, I don't get it. Like, I don't get politics. Like, I don't, like, kind of like what Jarvis was saying, like legislation, there's like lots of big things. Like, you tune it out to a degree because you're like, I'm sure people that are smarter than I are handling it. And then finally, I just kept on Instagram asking the public, and I'm not like an influencer, I just was asking random people, why do people need AR-15s? What am I missing? Why can't the president just sign an executive order and ban assault weapons? Like, just naive questions. And I realized people were with me. They're like, no, like, they don't need them. You're not missing anything. And so I asked, does anyone want to come to DC with me and yell at the top of our lungs that we want a federal ban on assault weapons until they listen? And I gave my personal email address out and went to bed, woke up with 300, 400 emails of like, I'm in. I have lobbying experience. I can help you. I have PR experience. I can help you. I can plan events. I can help you. I know how to get permits in DC. I can help you. I'm a survivor of a mass shooting or gun violence. I can help you. And March 4th, this organization was born within hours. And it's 100% volunteer run. And I think I'm like ADD brain, you can probably tell. And I need, just tell me one thing to do, right? Like, I love that there are people and organizations that have such multifaceted ways to tackle the insane problem that gun violence is in America. I'm like, if you give me 17 things, I already forgot the first one. So I need you to like break it down for me really simply. And so that's literally why March 4th exists, for one reason, to federally ban assault weapons. It, to me, is the low-hanging fruit of the legislation. The law existed in America for 10 years and it worked. So we have data, like real data. It saved lives. There was a decrease by 70% in mass shooting fatalities when there was a ban on assault weapons. And then it went away, and then mass shootings skyrocketed. And now we are in this country where this is just the norm. We talked about headlines and how most gun violence isn't in the headlines. The reality is, if America put all gun violence in the headlines, that would be our news cycle all the time. That would be the only thing we ever watched, listened to, or read. So we don't have to live like this. And there are so many organizations here doing their part. I think the important thing is to look at your sphere of influence and what are some small steps that you can take. So to me, while mass shootings are just 1% of the gun violence epidemic, and I get that, gun violence impacts Black and Brown communities way more than people that look like me. That being said, my sphere right now, can we just take the weapons that were made to kill the most amount of people, the quickest and the most effectively away from civilians? Can we just do that? Can we reenact a law that existed? So I know I'm going over time. I apologize. I just want everyone to say this with me. It's the guns. I can't hear you. It's the guns. If any other product was the #1 killer of kids in this country, it would be pulled from the shelves like that. So why do we treat guns any differently? So I guess my main message, my takeaway, if you want to support a federal ban on assault weapons, we're heading to DC in 2 weeks to March on the 17th. WeMarchForth.org is our organization, but support any and all organizations that are doing something. Just chip away at it, do your one little thing a day, and you will make a difference. Thank you.